we're going to try to grasp what feminism actually is. After 1892, feminism was officially described as a belief in and advocacy of equal rights for women based on the idea of the equality of the sexes. It was formed following the French term féministe after the First International Women's Conference in Paris. Feminism is a philosophy that advocates for equal rights for men and women, socially, politically, economically, and otherwise. It's grounded on the belief that women are oppressed or disadvantaged by comparison to men, and that their oppression is in some way illegitimate or unjustified. Under the umbrella of this general characterization, there are, however, many interpretations of women and their oppression, so that it is a mistake to think of feminism as a single philosophical doctrine or as implying an agreed political program. So before I go on to feminism, I would like to touch on two things. The first is misogyny. Misogyny is the discrimination against women simply because they are women. Feminism came to be because misogyny was prevalent throughout most of the world's history. Women were denied autonomy and personhood and were subjected to limiting oppressive standards because of their gender, and feminism arose as a vehicle to combat this oppression. The second thing is misandry, which is the discrimination against men because they are men. Many people mistake misandry for feminism. The common misconception about feminism is that it endorses radical man-hating. This isn't really the case. Anyone who claims to be a feminist while actively advocating for reverse discrimination against men is proposing misandry. Remember that feminism is founded on the equality of the sexes. So with that being said, a brief history of feminism. There are three waves. The first is women's suffrage in the 19th and 20th century. The second is women's liberation in the 1960s. And the third is a reaction to the failures of the women's liberation movement that started in the 1990s and is still going on. For the sake of time, I'm going to limit the history to America after about 1850, because there's a lot of feminist history out there. Okay, so the first notable gathering was in Seneca Falls in July of 1848. And typically, feminists of the first wave used one of two tactics to try to bring about change. They lobbied on the state and federal level for gender policy reform, or organizations like the National Women's Party used militant tactics like picketing and mass rallies and marches. Their main goal was to bring about women having the right to vote. By 1917, 13 states had granted women the right to vote, and Jeannette Rankin became the first woman in national legislature. And then finally, in 1920, women gained the right to vote with the 19th Amendment. For second wave feminism, there were a few societal expectations in the 1950s, which is the decade before the 1960s, obviously, that brought about women's need to bring about change. So women were expected to marry in their early 20s, start a family, and devote their lives to homemaking. They were legally subject to their husband through head and master laws, and women were kept out of working positions based solely on the fact that they were women. So some different tactics used during the second wave is organizations like the National Organization for Women, which was started by Betty Friedan, lobbied Congress for pro-equality laws to assist women in seeking legal aid to battle workplace discrimination in courts. They created local community groups where women explored topics such as family life, education, sex, and work in a safe environment that allowed them to share their own opinions. This was an important part of the second wave because it really brought solidarity amongst the different sort of factions and brought them together to focus on main causes. They put out magazines like Gloria Steinem's Miss Magazine, which expanded the audience to the general public at a national level and publicized problems ordinary women faced. They held mass strikes, and sometimes these approaches alienated people because the common misconception, like I kind of said before, was that radicals wanted to overthrow the patriarchy and that they believed oppressed every facet of women's lives. So several successes of this wave is that 2/3 of all new jobs went to women in the 1960s. They also legalized abortion and birth control, which opened the door for women to go into more professions. A clause prohibiting gender discrimination was put into the Civil Rights Act. They established irreconcilable differences as grounds for divorce and equalized property division during divorce. And they outlawed gender discrimination in education, college sports, and obtaining financial credit. So the third wave, which started in the mid-1990s with postmodernist ideas, used tactics like a rhetoric of mimicry to try to bring about change. A rhetoric of mimicry reappropriates derogatory terms, which I'm not going to say, but you can think just any bad name you've ever heard a girl be called, in order to subvert sexist culture and deprive it of verbal weapons. They spread to the internet to spread their propaganda, and they put a greater emphasis on establishing multicultural alliances among women and including certain groups of women who have previously been excluded as a result of several factors such as race, class, and sexual orientation. And they attempt to be more tolerant of varying ideologies even when they deviate from the traditional feminist party line. Okay. So next, feminist positions. I will go through some typical feminist ideologies, and I will be exploring these topics via two frameworks or points of view. The first is traditional feminism, which was a movement that sought for women to be treated as equal to men. Such political issues included women's suffrage, equal pay, equal employment opportunities, etc. Typically, this equality is achieved through abandoning what was once thought to be feminist qualities for what are considered to be more masculine qualities. The second framework is neo-feminism, which describes an emerging view of women as becoming empowered through the celebration of attributes perceived to be conventionally feminine. Okay, some of the issues I'm about to talk about are no longer historically relevant, so I'm just going to kind of gloss over them. But other than that, I'll go through the issues systematically, starting with the traditional view and ending with the neo-feminist view. So the first is political equality, which is one of the ones I was talking about that is historically not really an issue. Feminists believed that women and men should be considered equal in the eyes of the law, and whatever privileges and rights were afforded to men should be afforded to women on this basis. They believed that political inequality had personal ramifications, and getting women into positions of political power was a top priority and a major determinant in achieving equality among the sexes because it would make change easier to enact. Okay. The next one is women's roles. So traditionally, they thought that women should break out of their bonds and try to achieve the same socioeconomic status as men, which means that they should basically try to be businessmen. And if women wanted to have families, it was frowned upon, and they were assumed that they were so oppressed that they could not recognize the freedoms that they were being given. So with this role, women were really not encouraged to have families or do any of the typically womanly things. With neo-feminism, they're basically focusing on giving women the right to choose. They believe that young women should celebrate their pluralities or personal and political contradictions and refuse to follow a feminist party line, which means that they should choose to wear makeup while maintaining a critical stance against the misogyny and racism inherent in the cosmetic industry. And for those of you who don't know, the feminist party line is constrictive, unfair expectations set up by certain definitions of feminism that would disqualify a person from being a feminist. So, like, in my own life, when I tell people I'm a feminist, and yet sometimes they go out and, like, wear makeup, they're like, oh, you can't be a feminist because you're wearing makeup. Or, you can't be a feminist because you actually like to shave and wear dresses. Typically, the feminist party line is supported by traditional feminists, and they look down upon those women who did not fit into their strict guidelines of what the enlightened female should be. So, another part of freedom to choose is neo-feminists think that a woman should be able to freely choose her own path in life, because in the past, feminism has pushed women away from wanting to be mothers, and neo-feminists want to reverse this because they realize that there are certain benefits of it. Okay. The next is marriage. Traditionally, feminists believe that men and women should be seen as equal partners in marriage. Wives should not have to kowtow to their husbands or be submissive to them, but because this was not the case in the past, they rallied for marriage laws to protect women's property rights and child custody rights. And they thought this was necessary because legally, wives were seen as men's property. Men could treat them terribly without the government having any ability to stop them, and in fact, the government often encouraged the ill treatment. There were laws in place that stated that women did not have the right to any property or wages they earned, and they didn't even have the right to keep their children in the event that they were lucky enough to secure a divorce, because that was also difficult to secure. Because women were expected to marry early and start families, they were not allowed to be divorced from their husbands unless they could prove that the husband had done something egregious, like infidelity. And feminists wanted women to have divorce and singlehood as options to oppose marriage, and frowned upon those women who did choose to marry. They also wanted to make it acceptable for mothers to have careers. So neo-feminists think that women whose goal it is to marry and have a family should not be discouraged from doing so. In fact, they should be encouraged to do so. They view marriage as an equal partnership between a man and a woman and believe that there are benefits gained from marriage that can only be gotten from that type of union. So they really put an emphasis on women coming back to the womanly qualities that they had once abandoned. The next topic is family responsibilities. Traditionally, they believe that women and men should share the same amount of domestic labor, because right now in the status quo, 8 to 10 women say that they still do more housework than their male partners, and women with dependent children are even more likely to say that. Most often, the workload is not shared because people believe that it will condemn a marriage to divorce and lead to depression and a dead husband by age 33. Obviously, this is not, or at least I hope it's not, true, because how many of you guys actually do housework? One, two, okay. Of the guys in the room, about half of you raised your hand, a little bit more than half. So, I mean, Mr. Barr isn't dead, right? He's older than 33. But anyway, feminists traditionally wanted to combat the idea that housework and childcare are strictly a women's work. So then neo-feminists believe that women who choose to take the sole responsibility for housework should be able to do so without being ridiculed or judged, and they believe that household responsibilities have a great importance in today's society and that these responsibilities should be ranked on the same level of importance as having a career. So whether a woman has a career or she's a stay-at-home mom, they think that her job is just as important. So next, violence against women. Feminists focus on breaking the silence about rape and sexual abuse because women should not be specific targets for violence simply because of their gender. As of today, most of the world refuses to recognize rape within marriage as a criminal offense. 89% of regular domestic violence victims are women. 2 women a week are killed by a male partner or a former partner, and all of this is not really an acceptable subject to talk about in today's society. It's usually just swept under the rug. So what traditional feminists did was they rallied against sexual harassment, which they got to be legally defined as a violation of women's rights in 1980. And because of this, spousal abuses became crimes and not tradition, and they redefined consensual sex. So, like, having sex with someone who's inebriated is not really considered consensual sex because their judgment was impaired and they couldn't correctly consent to it. So, how many of you would say that you've seen negative stereotypes of women perpetuated in mainstream media? Basically, everybody. Okay, so neo-feminism, besides focusing on stopping sexual harassment, like, specifically, also wants to stop the sexual objectification of women. They want to stop all objectification of women, but sexual objectification is the most rampant in today's society. They believe that the media perpetuates unhelpful stereotypes of women, and they view this because 70% of girls under the age of 7 say they want to be thinner. How many of you girls at age 7 were worried about being thinner? So, like, out of the entire room. I know personally, I was just worried about whether or not I was going to get to play with the Play-Doh during free time in Mr. Martin's class. I was not worried about my body image. So neo-feminists want to try to get the media to portray more realistic roles of women in, like, the way they portray them. Okay. Oops, I was supposed to do that. But anyway, I've talked about that already. Educational equality is another historically not really relevant issue. Feminists believed that females should not be denied access to education simply because of their gender, and they wanted females to have access to higher education and to be encouraged to expand themselves intellectually and pursue careers with their education. Okay. So, economic opportunities. Traditionally, feminists want women to have higher access to professions, especially medicine. They want to eliminate workplace inequality, which would be the denial of access to better jobs or a salary inequality, by using anti-discrimination laws, and they want to get better paid work so that the women can support themselves and their families. And neo-feminists want to go a step further than this. They want to get women in positions of economic power. And they want to do this by breaking the glass ceiling, which they define as overarching sexist structures in the workplace that stop women from holding as many positions of power as men. And they see that this is a problem because white men with bachelor's degrees still earn 40% more than white women with similar education levels, while women still account for 3% of CEOs for publicly traded U.S. companies. And all of this is despite the fact that a larger percent of women than men between the ages of 25 and 34 have bachelor degrees. So while women are generally more educated than men, men hold more of the positions of power. So it's not just like women aren't educated, therefore they're not getting the jobs issue. It's women are being denied these positions. Okay. So next is healthcare and reproductive rights. So traditionally, they believed that women's health should be an issue just important as men's health, because historically, men and women's bodies were just considered to be the same, and all of the medical research was just done on males' bodies. But as we know, female and male bodies are different. So what feminists do... Yes.
This is a shocking thing. This is really shocking.
So what feminists wanted to do was make a women-centered health care system. So they educated themselves on the female body and began giving classes on the subject and set up women's clinics and published reference books like Our Bodies Ourselves, which are still kind of used today. They're not used in our school, but in like other public schools. In terms of abortion, they wanted reproductive freedom for women and safe access to legal abortion, because as many as 5,000 women died annually previous to the Roe v. Wade decision due to illegal abortions, and many women became sterile because of them. They believed that general society should not be able to govern what a woman decides to do with her body. And on that same note, feminists also wanted to make it acceptable for women to delay or space their children with birth control, or to not have children at all. Neo-feminists believed that a woman can or cannot take advantage of birth control and abortion based on the desired paths of their lives. And they also believed that women should be encouraged to have children and that childbearing should be viewed as an important integral part of womanhood. So, the next topic is exclusively neo-feminist. Is exclusively neo-feminist. Because there are distinct differences between men and women that feminism has ignored in the past, neo-feminists want to focus on redefining masculinity so that it is less limiting to males. Examples of this would be removing the taboo of male emotion and allowing males, like females have done, to branch out and explore activities that have been considered typically feminine. Because if we can rethink the way men are taught to treat themselves and women, we can kind of nip misogyny in the bud. So, with all of these, keep in mind that both traditional and neo-feminism have people who take it too far. There are traditional feminists whose standards for women are just as restrictive and oppressive as those for before the feminist movement, such as with the Feminist Party line, I cannot wear lipstick or wear a dress and still be considered a feminist. And then there are neo-feminists whose ideas of feminism advocate for the same type of misogyny present before the feminist movement. These two extremes are present with all positions, and feminists as a whole should not be judged based off of the few extremists within the group. So, Christians historically have rejected feminism. However, this doesn't mean you have to. The Christian right wing fought against the advancements made by feminism, but you have to remember that a non-Christian America is a new phenomenon, and our country was built on Judeo-Christian values, which means that, especially with the whole abortion issue, feminism has largely gone against everything America has stood for when it came about. Okay, but anyway, you don't have to have the same opinion because, in my opinion, the Bible does advocate for feminism. People often use Proverbs 31 as the example passage for what a woman should be. Typically, it's used to say that a woman's place is in the home. However, from my own readings of it, it reads more like she's running a business. She keeps track of everything, is in charge of everything, and brings honor to her family. I see no reason why this has to be limited to activities that have traditionally been seen as female. Galatians 2:8 says, "There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you all are one in Jesus Christ." Basically, or biblically, at least from Christ's perspective, we are all counted the same. God does not judge us based off of our gender or any other physical characteristic, which means that there is no biblical basis for denying women basic human rights. Lastly, in my opinion, Jesus was the ultimate feminist. He did not judge the woman who committed adultery, like the Pharisees did, and he even went beyond that and seemed to realize that it takes two to commit adultery, and it was unfair to sentence her to death and not the man that she committed adultery with as well. After he rose from the dead, out of everyone that he could have appeared to, he chose to show himself to a woman. That just makes me happy. Jesus also taught that the greatest among us is those who serves, and in my life, for me, that has been mainly the women in my life. And then Jesus obviously does not discriminate against women, and if we are meant to model ourselves after him, then, whoops, neither should we. Okay, so my opinion, I am a feminist. With respect to the different categories I ran through previously, I typically fall in line with the side that says the women, and men for that matter, should be able to do whatever they want with their lives and not be judged or discouraged for it. While I am a feminist, I do not think feminism is perfect. I don't think it solves all the discrimination or oppression problems in American society. In fact, I think it makes these problems worse in certain situations by drifting into a realm of misinjury and tearing down gender roles entirely. As a feminist, I am not 100% against gender roles. I'm only against the oppressive ones. One problem with feminism I see today is that it tries to take away gender roles completely. In my mind, God created men and women to be different. While this difference does not make one better than the other, it does separate the two groups. For example, women are physiologically capable of bearing children, while men are not. Men naturally have more testosterone in their body, so it's easier for them to build muscle than it is for a female. And women have more connections between the left and right hemispheres of their brain, so they're more in touch with their emotions, and it's easier for them to express them to others than it is for males. As humans, we spend our whole lives defining ourselves. For example, I am a female African-American teenager, that's 3 right there, who is a self-proclaimed metalhead and techie. We use these groupings and labels to help us navigate our social world and form relationships with one another. Feminism is trying to take away one of the most fundamental groupings that we put ourselves in. If we eliminate gender roles completely, there will be no roadmap or guideline for us to base our actions off of, which can lead to a sense of dissociation, isolation, and confusion that ultimately leads to more oppression and possibly the undoing of any progress feminism has made thus far. On a different note, many people say that because of this, feminism isn't relevant in today's society because women are already treated well. I agree that, in America at least, women have made large strides towards equality. Studies have shown that American women are among the most privileged in all of history. However, I disagree with the part that says that feminism isn't necessary in today's society. Although women are severely less underprivileged than before, they are not esteemed equally to men. There's a large disrespect for the personhood of women that I have directly experienced in my own life. So over the summer, I went to go visit my cousin who goes to Georgetown. So I took a train for 3 hours. I was sitting by myself in the window seat, and I put my suitcase on the aisle seat because I didn't really want to sit next to anyone. But then as the train started to fill up, I decided, let me not be that person. Let me just move the suitcase and let someone sit there. So this male decides to sit next to me. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. He's not talking to me. Nothing's happening, right? He picks up a magazine. He sits down. He puts his hands in his pockets. All of a sudden, I see this jerking motion out of my peripheral vision. And I'm sitting there, okay, and I look over, and he is stroking himself through his pockets while sitting next to me on the train.
Nice.
So, wow, you know, because, at first I was like, no, this can't actually be happening. He has to be doing something else. So, I sat there for a second and was like, no, he is actually sitting there masturbating next to me. Okay, so then I basically screamed at him and told him to run away. But I don't know what it is about me or what this man had to think to convince himself that his actions were completely acceptable in that situation. All I know is that I need feminism because I shouldn't have to ride a train while fearing for myself than fearing that I will be violated in any way. So, with all of that being said, how many of you would consider yourself feminists now? Oh, a few more people. Okay. So, my challenge to you is evaluate the situation for yourselves. Try not to limit someone else based off of your own beliefs. Love one another, especially those that you think don't deserve it. And for the males, don't assume that you know what a certain woman's place is and then try to put her there. And for females, explore all of your options, but in the end, you should stay true to who you are and what you believe. And for everyone, challenge the basis for any oppressive systems you see around you, because we cannot affect change unless we first recognize a problem.
Yeah.
The end.
questions for Faith.
That guy must be a psycho.
Yes.
So within marriage, like since you're a feminist and you believe in marriage, that you believe that you were saying like that it's an equal partnership, right? So like, do you believe in like the woman who like submissive to her husband thing? Where do you stand with that?
I mean, okay. In some respect, I believe that they should be. Let me say it right. I think that they should both be submissive to each other. Like, the Bible calls men to care for women and to pay attention to their needs and to provide for them. And in exchange, women are supposed to try to do all that they can to make sure that the man can fulfill that obligation. So it's kind of like a mutual respect situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't think that the man is more dominant?
I don't.
Like he should make final like decisions or stuff like that.
I think it should be a group effort. I don't think a man should just be able to tell his wife, "You're going to do this because I'm your husband and I said so." Like, that's not going to fly with
Well,
me.
yeah. I think there's a line, of course. Yeah. But, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, you don't have to get really into detail if you don't want to, but what was the guy's like response when you got
He kind of got up and was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. And then he asked me where the bathroom was, which I just thought was icing on the
That's
cake.
nasty.
Find it for yourself.
Yeah.
Faith, would you say it's a little bit ironic, talking about like how cultures change? Just go back over your timeline from like the 3 waves of feminism. I think it's a little ironic if you went back to any of the times starting in the 1860s, going forward with the Victorian era, heading towards the 40s and 50s. In the most oppressive areas towards women, it would have been the least socially acceptable for him to touch himself. In other words, we're in an area where we have great liberation, both men and women. But it was the areas where you had a much stricter like distinction between men and women, where something like that, like public indecency, would never have happened. And if it would have been like condemned roundly. People would have stood up and like castigated the guy.
Which is what I tried to get at the end with the whole feminism is destroying gender roles, because at some point you just have to teach guys that it's not okay to masturbate in public places. Like, that should just be a part of common courtesy.
But like, wouldn't a girl could do the same thing technically?
But
like,
it would be
everybody's just
more
masculine.
obvious. It would be a lot more obvious and a lot more difficult.
No. What I'm saying, I'm not saying that specific. I'm not saying masturbation. I'm saying like another situation. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of situations like you were saying. Like, it's also women against men. So yeah, you could just.
Do you think actually, if you think that feminism, the word itself, is sexist? Because we're only advocating for equality. We're not advocating for like females should be better. We're only saying equality, so it shouldn't like be just equality.
First, egalitarianism is something completely different. Second, they chose feminism because they're siding with the side that has typically been the most disadvantaged.
It's specific.
Like, so it brings to light the plight of that.
So for example, if I do not like racism, I'm against racism, but I would describe myself, I pursue equality. But why do you say you are a feminist when you just want equality between men and women?
Because typically, like I just said before, women have been the more disadvantaged group.
Like I said, like if it's a race,
it's more effective to enact change if you side, or if you actively bring to light the plight of the side that is the most disadvantaged. And because women have been the most disadvantaged, the name feminism just gets it in people's heads. They're automatically going to be thinking about women now, instead of just overall across the board. Even though overall across the board is what we want.
Oh, I have a question. Kara, because I didn't know this one on the worksheet and kind of interesting. What's the feminine mystique?
Oh, The Feminine Mystique is a book written by Betty Friedan that basically told women that they should pursue happiness and fulfillment outside of the home.
Oh,
It was like the first time that this idea had ever been popularized. Allison, do you have a question?
it's okay.
Christy.
So, do you think it's like okay for like because a lot of people who are not feminists will be very like harsh against mothers who are working and aren't with their child for like the first few years, like as a mother in the home all the time kind of thing, and she's working, they put the baby in the daycare, blah blah blah. So like, where do you stand with that? I mean, I'm guessing as a feminist.
It worked well with me.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay. It's kind of just like a balance. Like you have to gauge how much time you're spending with your child. I think you should, like, it should be a feasible act to both nurture your child and work at the same time.
Yeah.
But you also just articulated earlier that there are some fundamental differences, and you talk about the apparatus to actually carry and deliver a child versus the extra testosterone and the physical strength of a man. And hand in hand with that goes, there's other hormones present in a woman in different degrees than there are in a man. So a woman does respond very differently to her newborn than a man does. You know, I knew that, I heard that many times talking about oxytocin and these other, but when I actually just went through it in the last year, you know, it radically changed. Like my way my wife's like her attachment is a very, very powerful thing. I love my kid just as much, but it manifests itself differently. You know. I comment a question. The comment is back to what I was talking about earlier. The sad irony that in times when there was more of a patriarchy, going back, I just think of England, you know, and women were denied the full vote, and were not encouraged to seek like full-time employment like at the same level a man was. But at the same time now, there's a wistfulness for those times. Because if you just go online now and Google Liverpool, Sheffield, like party night, Friday and Saturday night there's just hundreds of young women, like passed out, pools of vomit, like they're indecently exposed because they've lost they're drunk. The guys and girls are drunk, or girls and guys drunk, and like they're in all kinds of states of like, of half or scantily clad because they can't use judgment anymore. And it seems to me there was a time when we might have had a better balance as far as maintaining that distinction between feminine and the male, and filling certain roles. All the guys and girls just being bawdy and kind of being out and being thuggish. There's something missing in that society.
Like, I don't necessarily align myself with the side that says that the sexual revolution in its entirety was okay, because I don't think casual sex works. Like, I just don't think that it's good. And I think along with that goes the whole partying, we're free, we can do what we want, we can get drunk, we can go out and get wasted. Like, I don't think that that's good either.
What do you think globally? What are the biggest, the truest feminist, wrongs, as far as abuses of women's rights? Where do you think globally that place, where are those things happening? Are they happening in the United States, or are they happening elsewhere?
Now, probably, around, I'm trying to think of the name of the ocean there, but I can't, the Middle East, with genital mutilation and, having 13-year-olds marry 30-year-olds in India and, those areas.
You did a good job of distinguishing at times between traditional and neo, and my desire for students of mine who are females and are seniors is that they continue to build their own definition as they go, and one of those things would be becoming an advocate for some of these countries where women's rights they truly don't exist. Thank you very much, Faith.
Okay. So you said that feminism comes with a bunch of taglines oh, you're feminist so you can't wear makeup, oh, you're feminist so you can't show your legs, etc., etc.
It has historically, yes.
Sorry?
It has historically, yes.
Okay. So then would you say if you don't support abortion, for example, or you don't support
that you can't be a feminist?
Yeah.
No. I think you should be able to. Your feminism can be different than my feminism, also. As long as we base it on equality.
Cool beans.